Hello and welcome everyone to Twinsburg Public Library webinars. Today's topic is PowerPoint 10 Tips for the Workplace. You'll notice that I am not showing you a slideshow today. I'm actually showing you the work area PowerPoint. So since we're actually going to be using PowerPoint, I figured, well, we'll just use it in its natural works area state instead of showing you a traditional PowerPoint presentation. So let's begin. Quick thing about the webinar, it will be about 30 to 40 minutes long, probably more like 20 to 30 minutes. Typically these top 10 tips go pretty fast. It is taught by library staff. Specifically, my name is Crystal. I teach a lot of the computer classes here. I have a few assumptions about you. They are that you have used PowerPoint and you're familiar with the basics. So I'm not going to go into how to add content, how to add elements like text boxes or images. I assume you already know that and that you've actually done PowerPoint presentations before. You're here just to kind of improve your technique or maybe learn about a couple things you might not have used before in PowerPoint. If you did need help with the basics, don't worry, we got you covered. We do offer computer classes. And we also offer one-on-one computer coaching. So if you want to come in for a one-on-one session on the fundamentals of PowerPoint, you can call the Twinsburg Public Library and schedule your session today. Before I begin, is there anything in specific that you wanted to learn today? If so, go ahead and type it in the chat box, and at the end of this presentation, I will go back and review any questions or suggestions or tips that you may have. Tip number 1, free and legal images. So today's presentations, people expect more images and less text on the slide. And the issue with this, especially if you are doing a PowerPoint presentation for work or for profit, if you're a consultant, if someone finds out that you've used their image without permissions or without crediting them appropriately, you may find yourself in some legal hot water. You might owe fines or fees to the copyright holder. Unfortunately, PowerPoint kind of makes it easy to accidentally use an image without realizing you don't have the permissions. In 2013, Microsoft Office decided to drop the clip art library. And actually, specifically, this happened in February of this year, 2015. You'll notice that instead of the clip art library, we now have online pictures. So it will actually do a Bing image search for images from online whenever you want to insert a picture. Now by default, when you do a search for an image, it will look for Creative Commons copyrighted material. So Creative Commons is an alternative to traditional copyright. It just means that people who put these images online grant you various permissions and levels of permissions for using their work without having to pay them fees. Typically, these images do require some sort of acknowledgement or accreditation. So this person took this image from this website and that's all they ask. So as long as you cite your source, you will typically fall under the Creative Commons licensing agreement. Now, that being said, always read the license when you download images. So here I'm doing an insert image. I'm going to do a quick image search for, I'll just do horses. So right away, here are my images of horses. I see a yellow band at the bottom. Search results are image licensed under Creative Commons. Please review the specific license for any image. So even though Bing is supposed to filter these images based off the license type, it does still fall on you to verify that those images are Creative Commons licensed and that you have the right permissions and you're using it in the appropriate manner. So unless you're very confident in this search, you might want to go to other sources. So the great place to start for free and legal images is creativecommons.org. Creativecommons.org explains the Creative Commons licensing a little bit more in detail. And it also lists sites that host Creative Commons media. So images, audio, video, you name it. So they have different sites that host these files. So I suggest starting there. A couple of good image sites would be morgfile.org or wikimediacommons.org or flickr.com. So any of these sites would be a good place to snatch some images. Flickr.com is part of their users agreement. When you upload photos, you agree to share them with the general public. Wikimediacommons.org has a great source of public domain images, and workfile.org has a lot of amateur images, but some of them are actually pretty good, and they are associated with iStock. So these are some good sites to get some images from. Here's a screen grab from Workfile, an image of a waterfall. So if I decided that I wanted to use this image, right away the license is right here. I can read exactly what the Creative Commons license requirements are. So it wants us to do, we're allowed to copy it, we're allowed to distribute it, we can do anything we want to do this, we just can't sell the photo in a standalone manner. So that's tip number 1, free and legal images. Be careful where you get your media. Tip number 2, image compression. So if you ever have to email your PowerPoint to another party, sometimes if you have a lot of images, it can make the file size huge and either slow down the email, or maybe some email providers or work areas won't accept a file of that size. So what you can do is compress the image to decrease the file size and ensure that the PowerPoint will probably go through. Here I have the same image on the slide, but one image is compressed and the other is not. So even though the image on the left is compressed, I can still make out the library. You'll notice that there are a couple of dots. It looks like a photo from maybe the late 90s, early 2000s, whereas the image on the right is crisp and easier to see. So if you're going to present, you're going to want to use the original file size. If you just have to email it to share it with someone or show someone the PowerPoint, and just to get it through, you can compress the image. To compress images, you click on the image that you would like to compress, go to your Picture Tools ribbon, and on the left side in the Adjust group, we see a command that says Compress Pictures. Click that command, Compress Pictures. They give you a few options, so I can only apply it to my selected picture, or by unchecking the box, I can apply these options to all my images throughout PowerPoint. If you have cropped images, I would suggest deleting the cropped areas because that will further reduce your file size. When you crop an image, the full image is still available on PowerPoint. It's just hidden to show the parts that you want to focus on. Beneath these options, we have the target output. So you can reduce things to 150 ppi or email for 96 ppi. Or you can use the document resolution, which is the original image size. So you can play around with these options to see what works best and what suits your needs. I'm going to cancel this, but again, to get to that, click on the image you want to compress, go to the Picture Tools ribbon. On the left side, click Compress Pictures command. Select the options you want to compress the pictures. Now you can reset the image to the original resolution under any circumstance before you save and exit. Once you compress an image, you save it, you close PowerPoint, that's it. You can't go back and revert it to the original. You'll have to reinsert the original to the PowerPoint. So another tip related to this, I guess, would be maybe have two different files, one with the compressed images and one with the original images. Tip number 3, so this is something that I teach in intermediate PowerPoint that a lot of people didn't know that you could do or how to do from before. You can actually make your own PowerPoint slide design based off an image or logo. You can apply it across all slides, you can apply it to certain slides, you can adjust the transparency of the image so that it's easier to see text and foreground images on the slide. So this particular slide, you can see that I have the library logo as an image background. So how do I do that? Well, here's a blank slide. To create your own background, to create your own design, you're going to go to Design, on the far right you have the Format Background command. Click Format Background, and you have a couple of choices. You can make a solid color background, you can provide a gradient fill, which are these little dots and different shades of color. But what we're interested in is the pattern or texture fill. So when you click Picture or Texture Fill, you can then choose to insert your picture from a file you saved on your computer, an image that you have on your Microsoft clipboard, or an image that you can do an online search. Now be warned, the online search is the same search from before, so again you want to verify that you have right to use any Creative Commons licensing and that it is indeed using Creative Commons licensing if you're going to use a web search. But we're going to do from file. So if I click from file, I can go into my pictures library, pick a picture, click insert, and now this jellyfish is the background image of my slide. It's very vibrant and dark, so text and images on top of this will not do. I won't be able to read it. So I can go in where it says transparency, and I can either click the up and down to move the percentage points, or I can click and drag the slider to increase the transparency. So I can actually make a faded image as my background and make my own PowerPoint design. So one more time, to do this you're going to go to Format Background, choose Picture or Texture Fill, insert your picture from File, from your clipboard, or from an online source. Adjust the transparency as needed. If you want to apply this to all your slides, click Apply to All. If you decide that I don't really like this background, you can click Reset Background, and that will remove the image from the background of the slide. Moving on to tip number 4. PowerPoint lets you add screen grabs or screenshots and screen recordings easily into your slide. So by default, when you have a slide and it's asking you to add elements, the shortcuts are table, charts, smart graphs, images, and videos. But if you want to do a screenshot, you can actually go to the Insert ribbon and choose either Screenshot or Screen Recording. So if you wanted to show a step-by-step how-to, for example, you can do a screen recording of you maybe editing an image or going online to a specific website and accessing a specific source, and you can add that video directly to your PowerPoint, or just add a still screenshot to your PowerPoint. The methods for both of these are the same, so I'm just going to focus on the screenshot because it's easier for me to do a screenshot while recording than it is to do a recording while recording. I click the screenshot, choose screen clipping. What it does is it minimizes PowerPoint for me, and it shows what is behind PowerPoint. So if I have another window running, or if I just want to show my desktop, whatever happens to be behind PowerPoint, the last thing you did will appear. A white film appears over your screen, and your cursor becomes a dark cross. When you see the dark cross, you can click and drag to select the part of the screen that you want to show on your slide, and then PowerPoint will automatically add it into your slide. This is just a quick, easy way for you to add screenshots without having to minimize your window or use your clipboard. It takes a lot of the steps out of having to copy paste or do a screenshot. So again, I'm going to do that one more time. Go to Insert, go to Screenshot, Screen Clipping. When my screen becomes white, my cursor becomes a dark cross, I can now click and drag to select the region that I want to appear in my PowerPoint presentation. So that's how you insert a screenshot or a screen recording into your PowerPoint presentation. Tip number 5, importing an Excel chart. A lot of times presentations we are talking about different reports or data collections that we've done for work, and you might want to show an Excel chart. Now you can copy and paste anything from one Office product into another, so that's not the issue. But if your data changes, you're going to want to make sure that you have the most up-to-date version of the chart. This is how you would do that. So if you want your data to be up-to-date, up to the minute when you do your presentation, this is an easy way to do so. I'm going to go into the next slide and show you two different methods for inserting an Excel chart. First, I'm going to show you my Excel chart. So I'm just going to minimize this window. Here's the Excel chart that I'm going to use. When it opens, I'm going to show you this very specific way I have the data organized. So down here, I have two different tabs. I have my one tab that contains the data, and then I have the other tab that contains the chart. The tab that contains the chart is the first one in the list. So I specifically moved my chart as the first tab on my Excel spreadsheet. First, I'll show you how to copy paste using Paste Special. So I already have my Excel open. I already have my chart that I want. I can copy and paste this into PowerPoint. So I right click onto the chart and I copy it. Simple enough. We all have done that before. Now I'm going to go back into my PowerPoint slide and I'm going to right click. Notice that I have different pasting options. One of the paste options is use destination theme and link the data. The other option next to that, keep source formatting and link data. The link data part is what's important. So I can choose to keep my chart the exact same way it was from Excel, or I can have PowerPoint use the same color schemes that I'm using in other parts of my PowerPoint. But as long as the data is linked, that's what keeps it up to date, so that when I go in and change my Excel file, it will update the PowerPoint. So I'm going to use the source formatting and link data. This is considered a paste special command. So I'm going to minimize my PowerPoint, bring back my Excel file, and just for example, I'm going to make a drastic change to one of these. I'm going to change this 250 to 10,000. So that's a drastic change that I apply to the data. It's updated in my Excel chart, and it should also be updated in my PowerPoint chart. So that's the power of linking the data. You know that your chart is going to display the most current data series that you have. So that's right click copy, right click paste, and then choose one of the paste options that has link data. I'm going to delete this. The other option you have is to insert object. So when you insert an object into PowerPoint, you're essentially inserting a linked file or a file. So I'm going to do create from file because I already have my Excel chart created. I'm going to browse to where my Excel chart is saved. And then next to browse, I have a little link button. I click that to check it. Click OK. And now my chart is inserted and the data is linked. And this is why I have the chart as the first sheet, because when you insert from object, it's going to pull from the first sheet. So there you have it. Those are the two ways that you can insert an Excel chart into your PowerPoint with the data linked so that you always have up-to-the-date information. Alright, next up, we're going to talk about tip number 6, which is presentations. With presentations, there is the Kowalski 10-20-30 rule, and I do apologize if I said his name wrong. That basically means for a big impact, have 10 slides, last 20 minutes for the presentation, no less than 30 font. This rule is very specific for people who are making pleas for funding, who are trying to sell a product to investors. So it's very specific for that case. It does not apply to everybody. But what's important about this rule is that it highlights having less text and more images. Now, I'm going to give you 2 tips in one, basically, when it comes to presentations, because I have seen the worst of both. Do not have a ton of text on your PowerPoint. Do not have paragraphs on your PowerPoint. When you do, you tend to read it verbatim, and that's not a presentation, that's just you reading to someone. I've also seen a presentation that had nothing but images, and I mean nothing but images. They had charts and graphs, and they didn't even have labels on their charts and graphs. It was completely indecipherable to me. So you don't want to be on either end of the spectrum. You do want to have some text, at the very least labels, and you do want to have images because it's visually appealing, and it helps make a bigger impact. People are going to remember well thought images more than a paragraph of text. Plus, if you just have a few images and a few words here and there, the focus is on you, and that's how it should be. What you have to say is more important than any PowerPoint presentation. In fact, if you are reading it verbatim off a PowerPoint, or if you're not engaging the audience and making eye contact, then you really shouldn't be doing this as a presentation. You should be doing this as a report. So what you have to say is important. So again, for tip 6, the 10-20-30 rule, you don't have to follow this exactly because it is for a very specific situation, but take from it the idea that you're not supposed to have too much text and you're not supposed to have too many images. Speaking of images, tip 7 and 8 are related, so they're going to be presented together. So adjusting transition times and understanding those timings. I'm going to show you this slide as a PowerPoint presentation. That was a transition. It was a little bit more complicated transition than usual, and it was fast. So if you're going to have transitions in between slides, there's nothing wrong with that. But think of your audience. If you're presenting to a group of adults who are there for a conference, you don't want to spend a lot of time on transitions and times. It's distracting, and adults are not amused. If you're presenting to children, if you're a teacher, or if you're presenting to a high school on behalf of teachers, then you might have a couple of transitions and animations just to keep the kids paying attention. So think of your audience first and foremost. If you do add transitions, you're going to want to make sure that you have appropriate timings. So if I go into transitions, the transitions ribbon, on the far right I have my timings group. I have the option of adding a sound per transition, but please don't do this if you're presenting to adults. It is annoying. If you're doing it for like a K through 6th grade, sounds might keep them happy. Beneath that we have durations. So this particular transition is going to take 2.25 seconds. This is done in seconds. The faster the transition, the better. If it's too fast, you might make your audience dizzy. But basically, if it's taking, let's do 5 seconds, for example. I'm going to change this to 5 seconds. Watch the transition. It's too slow. It's too slow, and it's going to unconsciously make you slower as well. You're going to pause, or you're going to get tripped up when you see that. So don't do it. Keep it at a nice, fast, even pace. Next to the seconds timing, we have advanced slide on mouse click. or after a specified amount of time. The specified amount of time is great if you know you're going to be spending a certain amount of time on each slide and it's the same amount of time or what have you. That's great. But I'm going to say you might want to keep it on mouse click just because things always come up and even the most well-behaved audience will find a way to interrupt you. So I would keep it on mouse click until you become a complete pro at presenting. And then keep your duration for timings at a nice short under 3 seconds transition. In fact, 2 seconds is a good time. Pay attention when you apply transitions. Each of them have their own default timings. Alright, tip number 9, animations in order. You can actually have different images appear at different times on your slide to help emphasize a point or idea. So I have here 2 images. I have pictures of unicorns and I have pictures of an electric grid. And let's say I'm talking about mythology or fantasy versus science and, data or something like that. So I want to compare this idea of fantasy versus science. And I want to talk about science during one part of the presentation and talk about science during the other half. Well, I might not want to have these 2 images up at the same time because they're conflicting. So when I'm talking about fantasy, I want the unicorns to appear. When I'm talking about science, I want the electric tower to appear. So to do that, we're going to apply animations. I know that my unicorn is going to be first, so I'm going to go to the animations ribbon and apply an animation. The green animations are for entrance, the yellow animations are for emphasis, and the red is for exit. So if my image is just going to be emphasized but stay on the slide during the entire time, I would use one of the yellows. If I want my image to appear and leave at certain parts of my presentation, I'm going to use red and green. So I'm going to have my unicorn appear with a wipe. Again, paying attention to the duration. So here you want animations to be less than a second if you can. It's just easier to keep the attention of your audience. Notice that a number 1 appeared on my unicorn. So this means 1 animation is applied, and it's the first animation. Now, this number 1 will not be shown during a presentation. You only see it when you're in PowerPoint working area like this. So it entered, now I want it to exit after it enters. So I'm going to add an animation. So this will level the animations. I'm going to add an animation, and again I have my 3 categories. But this time I want the animation to exit. So I'm going to tell it to fade out. Now I have animation 1, animation 2 in that order. Up at the top near my timings group, I can reorder the animations if I make a mistake. Notice that my start is on click. This lets me control when the animation appears and when the animation exits. So I have to use my arrow keys or my mouse to have the image appear or exit. If I want it to be automatic, I can change this and tell it to happen after the previous animation or with the previous animation if I want it to occur at the same time. But I'm going to keep it at on click. So now my unicorns have entered and exited. I want my science image to enter and exit. I'm going to do the same thing. First I'm going to apply an enter. And that animation I think is too slow. I'm going to make it a little bit faster. Then I'm going to add another animation. And I'm going to have it exit. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I use the add animation button to level it to make it occur in a certain order. Let's do the presentation. I decide to start talking about fantasy. I am done talking about fantasy. I talk about science. I am done talking about science. And to move between the two images, I just used my Enter key on my keyboard, and we'll talk more about keyboard shortcuts in a minute. So that's tip number 9, understanding and using animations in order appropriately. And we're going to go into tip number 10, which is my personal favorite, the keyboard shortcuts. If you don't know the keyboard shortcuts, learn them, because this is going to make your presentation seem very professional. It's going to take you from amateur to professional. What do I mean by that? Well, here's a list of keyboard shortcuts. I have Shift F5 for starting show from current slide, F5 for start show from the first slide, arrow keys to move back and forth, escape to end your show, B equals black slide, and I'll talk about how to use that in a second, Control P for pin pointer, Control E for eraser, Control A for arrow. So why are these keyboard shortcuts great to use? Notice that if I want to start from the current slide and I'm moving my mouse, I have to go to slideshow from current slide. That delay is a little sloppy from the audience point, and it actually does stop your ability to give the presentation. So if you have to stop and think about clicking on the right command, it might stop your flow of conversation. So instead of using your mouse to click slideshow from current slide, you can just hit Shift on your keyboard, F5, and it will start the show right away at that slide. Likewise, you can hit F5 on your keyboard to start a fresh PowerPoint presentation. Now, using the arrow keys are preferred to using the mouse. Here's why. I can use the mouse to left click to move on to the next slide. That's not a problem. But if I need to go backwards a slide, so someone asks me a question or I forgot to talk about something important, I have to move my mouse over the slide, right click, and tell it to do previous. That right click previous looks sloppy. It really does. It also stops your flow of conversation. So instead of relying on the mouse right clicking, if you use your arrow keys, you can move back and forth very quickly and very seamlessly. It just looks better than using that right click previous. So B for blank. This is a great dramatic thing that you can do for pausing. Now, there's nothing wrong with the screen. It should look black. So let's say you're giving a presentation and you want all eyes on you. You want to be focused on, it's a dramatic moment in your presentation. If you hit B, as in bank, on your keyboard, it blacks out the screen. All eyes immediately turn to you. It's a great way to add dramatic effect or emphasis on what you are saying so people aren't paying too much attention to the slide and neglecting you. So beyond the arrow keys and the B, you can also use your controls. So Control P for pin pointer, Control E for eraser, Control A for arrow. So if I hit Control P on my keyboard, there's a little red dot that appears, and this is my mouse, so that I can go back and I can underline or circle very important pieces of information on the slide. Control E lets me erase that marking, and Control A turns it back into an arrow. So again, Control P to emphasize something very important, or Control E to bring on the eraser. Control A to move your cursor back to the arrow. At the bottom of the slide, you're going to notice an article that I've highlighted. And there's a long URL there, but really if you Google the phrase, use keyboard shortcuts to deliver your presentation, these words right here, you'll find it. It's written by Microsoft, and it's just a great list of all the keyboard shortcuts you can use in PowerPoint. You don't have to memorize all of them, but some of them really do come in handy. The ones specifically I have on the PowerPoint presentation, I strongly encourage you to learn. So that's the top 10 tips. I do have a bonus tip. In case you may not have heard of it, Office Mix is available for everyone who has PowerPoint. Office Mix is a new ribbon that lets you create recorded videos of your PowerPoint presentation. So if you can't give a live presentation, you can record your slides. It records your voice, and it also lets you add interactive elements. So if you want to add polls or quizzes or a way for your audience to provide feedback, Office Mix allows that. So I'll show you the ribbon up top. I can do a slide recording, which starts my presentation recording. I can add quizzes. Again, I can add my screen recordings and my screenshots, insert videos, insert audio. All of these are basically already available in PowerPoint, but they put it in one location to make it easier to make your recording. And then you can actually publish your PowerPoint mix onto Microsoft's website. You're also allowed to export it to other elements as well. So if I have any teachers, it does export to Score, or you can export it to a regular video. So if you haven't already installed this, you might want to. It's free, just from mix.office.com. It is kind of fun, and it actually does make your PowerPoint presentation more active. With that being said, all of my images are Creative Commons license. They were from workfile.com. They require no attribution as long as I did not use them in a standalone manner. So again, it goes back to knowing where your images come from. If you have any questions, now is the time to ask.